I think the Trump 2017 tax cuts for the wealthy was negative for our economy. Why do I think that? They increased our deficit tremendously, the U.S. deficit, so that young people like yourself are going to be paying that off. Our country will be paying it off, but we'll be burdening you guys with it for decades. And there was no reason to do that. U.S. corporate tax policy is so skewed toward corporations that it's out of balance. And what do I mean by that? The effective tax rate for corporations in the 21st century, I'll call it right now, is somewhere around 20%. And some of them know all the ways to get around it that they don't even pay taxes on it. Whereas if you go back to the 1950s and 60s, the corporate tax rate, the average tax rate in the United States was somewhere around 60%. Those companies still made a lot of money. They were fine. But yet we had money for the government to invest in a lot of big programs that really helped our country. The interstate highway system, the NASA, better services for the poor. A lot of big projects that, while they're not perfect, they were good for raising the overall standard of living of our country. Trump isn't the first one to try to believe in this trickle-down economics. It goes back, the term goes back to the 80s. But it doesn't work where you cut taxes to the super rich, they make a lot of money, and then they spread it out to the poor. That doesn't happen. It's proven to be false. What it did do is make a bunch of super rich even richer. And I'll go back to my last little point. When I was your age, the difference between the richest Americans and the poorest Americans was much closer. And there was a strong middle class. In the 60 years that I've been alive, the difference between the wealthiest Americans and the poorest Americans, even with adjustments for inflation, has grown larger, and the middle class has gotten smaller. That economic condition is not beneficial to our political system, which is a free market republic democracy. And so you've got to have educated middle class, a strong middle class, to have a democracy that knows how to understand politics and vote and make good decisions about what leaders are doing the right things for our country. And as you rip that apart and create this sort of wealthy individuals and peasants who work for minimal wages, you create a broken economic system like the Middle Ages, where the rich have everything you possibly want and the poor are barely surviving, and that's not healthy. That usually leads to revolution. So I think the 2017 tax cuts that Trump did only escalated that difference in economic abilities of our country. Neither election, the first one nor the second one.
Is it like because didn't support his policy? Was it because it was the other candidate, anything but Trump? What was your sort of thought process by it?
In the first election with Hillary Clinton, it wasn't that I had a great fondness for Hillary Clinton. What I knew was Trump was a fraud. Mm-hmm. I've read enough about him over the years that I realized that he was just a talker.
Yeah.
And there was not a lot of substance to his policies. He's not a successful businessman. You can read a lot of literature out there that have been written about him, and he is a great intimidator, and he is a great
Talker almost.
talker. Yeah, but I was going to say promoter. He is very good at promoting himself, but he is not a. Most of his businesses do not make money. He runs this scheme of one's going down, he declares bankruptcy, gets out, doesn't pay his bills, and moves it to another area and does the whole process again. That has been his whole his modus operandi. He has a few areas where he does well. He's got a few big buildings where he rents them out and he makes a lot of money on them. And those form the foundation of his wealth, but it's not as much as what he says, and he loses so much money in other areas. I think the reason why he hid his taxes is because he doesn't want that to come to light. I knew enough about him going into 2016 that I realized that I didn't like him. He wouldn't be good for our country, so I didn't want to vote for him. When it came to the second election against Biden, I liked Biden better, and so I wanted to vote for him. He wasn't my first choice, but I knew enough about Joe Biden that I thought he would be a good president.
Okay, that's completely understandable.
What events or movements were occurring during Donald Trump's presidency?
Yes.
Political events that I saw growing was the growth of I'll call it right-wing activist groups that were more centered on fear that the white race in America was under siege, that the traditions of America, European type traditions, were under siege, and then toward the latter part, I then saw the results of some of the police shootings that translated to the Black Lives Matter movement and some of the more minority-based protests for equal rights under the law. So that was the big political thing under Trump's presidency. I also saw a political movement that was Trump pulling the American global presence back into a kind of a nationalistic kind of position where we were less invested in trying to work with our allies and our other countries, I'll call it, to work toward global solutions. It became more of a let's put America first, and let's let America win, and we really don't care what the rest of the world happens to the rest of the world. If they do good, great, but as long as America wins. So that was kind of a political movement. And then an economic movement was, again, a long-term period of American-based companies, or companies that have a huge presence in America, sending manufacturing jobs to offshore countries to reduce their labor costs. I saw a continuation of that. That didn't stop from Clinton to Bush to Obama to Trump. That continued, in my opinion. The rates might have been different under different presidents, but it was still happening. And then the last thing I guess I saw economically was Trump trying to offset the trade deficit by this go-it-alone path of tariffs against our European allies and our adversaries such as China or Russia.